god, the Bleach manga is super long. Like, it's 74 volumes total, and since not all things were created equal, one has to focus on what to talk about, and ends up leaving like a bunch of little clever details forgotten in the discussion, you know? Because they're just nice things that aren't very relevant to get like a whole video or a whole essay written about them. So you just forget them, leave them to the wayside, you know? And that's kind of sad. So let's look at some of those often forgotten background details that are super cool, but you know, are not that relevant. Let's start with volume 1. At the end of chapter 1, there's like an okame, which are the pages in between chapters that generally have jokes, minor tidbits, or just cool, meaningful visuals. On chapter 1, it's Urahara going up to meet Rukia. We don't know who Urahara is at the point where this happens in chapter 1. He only shows up in volume 2. But you know, even within the context of the same arc, we know the person she met was Urahara. But we don't know what they actually talked about, and that very scene is actually very fucking important until like chapter 175, because that was the moment that Urahara offered Rukia the Gigai to ride the Hokyoku by making her powerless or something. And that's neat. Also from volume 1, Ishin attempts to get some patients to another hospital, right? And when he's denied, he tells the person to tell their boss it's a request from Kurosaki, and the boss will understand. The boss of another hospital is of course the other dead doctor with history with vision, Ryuku, who is revealed to have history with him way later in Arankar arc. But even here, they're also, you know, casually referencing this. And that's neat. Also, on the topic of Ishin, on volume 3's extra pages, Kubo tells us that at first he wanted to give him the job of mortician and that he would look much better in black than in white. Which, you know, he wears black in most of his appearances anyway. And beyond that, he's also, you know, a Shinigami, a guy that's very related to death. Shinigami literally means death god. So, you know, it's just a cool extension of that, and it's impossible to read it after knowing this revelation and not, you know, laugh a little bit. Because, you know, it's funny, he wanted to make him a mortician because there's going to be a Shinigami. And that's cool. Still, on volume 3, we see Huecomundo from the first time alongside some Arankars, but I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about D-Roy, who we see here has a cloth covering over half his fucking face. This is not commented on by anyone at any time, even when they show up later. But when he finally takes off that cloth against Rukia in volume 21 or so, it seems that he was masking a secret eye technique, but then he gets low-diffed, so we never actually find out if that was true or not. We only find out the truth about this fucking cloth on volume 32, when we see that Grimjaw low-diffs him and eats up a part of his face, which was covered with a cloth. And that, you know, also retroactively explains why the rest of the squad that Grimjaw was in, you know, treated D-Roy like a fucking jobber, because he jobbed way back when. And that's just neat. The cover of chapter 34 portrays Ishida, a Quincy, as Ichigo Shadow, Ichigo of course being a substitute Shinigami. The Quincy would later use shadows as a major motif in the final arc, literally exiting and entering from shadows of the Serete. They literally existed in the shadow of Soul Society. And I think that's neat. In volume 1, there's a short flashback with Orihime and her brother, which has distinct page borders. All the full-brain backstories we would later get in volume 54 also take cues from that, having distinct page borders. And that's just a nice connection to the first Fullbringer we ever meet, Orihime. Chapter 56 title is Broken Coda, referring to the broken promise, of course, that Ichigo had to protect everything that was important to him. However, the person in the cover page is not actually Rukia, but Hisana, Byakuya's old wife. We can tell because of the hair. So really, the chapter's title is not only about Ichigo's broken vow to protect, but Byakuya breaking his vow to take care of Rukia, the vow he made to Hisana, which adds another layer of tragedy to this, of course, and makes Byakuya just a little more of that piece of shit at the beginning of the Society arc. And finally, to close it out, since on the Substitute Shinigami arc, Ichigo is not actually using his own powers but what he borrowed from Rukia, he literally gets Rukia's sword. And of course, her sword has a unique design as opposed to the generic Asauchi design. And that fact indicates that she has already learned Shikai even on chapter 1. And only way later we actually get to see that. Of course, these were not the only relevant details in these volumes, but only the ones that are minor and don't feed much into anything else, and really are just a couple of sentences each. I didn't even touch on Zangetsu, for example, because everything there is super relevant. Bleach is super long and has a bunch of these small details, so I could probably make other videos on this concept. But still, doing this without touching on anything Zangetsu says is a little criminal, so let's go with the basic one. We see Ichigo standing on air for the first time on chapter 5. He does this instinctively because he's a Soul Reaper, and that only gets pointed out to him in volume 8 by Zangetsu. And it's a nice little payoff because this whole standing on air business is actually something that's pretty consistently used in the entire series. And yeah, comment if you want to see more shit like that. Anyway, like, subscribe, see you next time.